Thank you, and good afternoon, everybody. It's great to see such a enthusiastic and large turnout. Stantec is proud to be associated with YVR's success and to be part of the global airport consulting industry that has emerged in Vancouver. So I'm delighted to introduce as our speaker today, Craig Richmond, CEO of YVR, whom we at Stantec and I personally have had the pleasure with working on many airport projects, both locally and internationally. Part of the reason for YVR's success is that Craig demands world-class quality from his team and his consultants. Apart from his previous accomplishments, in 2016, Craig was recognized by Airports Council International with their first ever Excellence in Visionary Leadership Award. Craig won this award because of his commitment to innovation, promoting government policy, and leading YVR to record growth while delivering an exceptional passenger experience. And if you'll indulge me with a brief anecdote that may explain why Craig actually won this award, when we worked for Craig on the Nassau Bahamas project, at one of our initial meetings, we presented drawings to him for his review, and his reaction, and I quote, was that this concept isn't blowing the wind up my skirts yet. We were quick to find a concept that made him happy regardless of his choice of clothing. So ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Craig.
I'm going to say thank you, Stannis. Thank you very much. Well, good afternoon, everybody. Thanks, Stannis. I don't know if you all realize, Stannis is one of the leading airport designers and architects in the world, and as he said, our association with Stantec goes way back. I'd also like to thank our other presenting sponsor, CIBC. You can't build an international airport without great international banking, so thank you very much, Phil, for you and your team. Thank you, Ian, Greater Vancouver Board of Trade, for your tireless devotion to the commerce and the trade of BC. I am going to break from my speech for just a second and give a heart attack to the comms team because I have a lot of previous bosses in the audience. I might have missed some of you, but previous board members, Darcy Rezak, and it was mentioned, Graham Clark, and a few others, and of course, Larry Berg, my previous boss here and predecessor here. Where are you, Larry? Just so I would know where to look, thank you. I promised only recycle a few of your jokes, and George Casey from Vantage. So I feel like I'm definitely under the gun, but in a very good way. You know, you'll see Lego as one of the themes we have today, and I actually have mixed feelings about Lego because I had a lot of joy with Lego, and then I had that horrible moment that if you haven't gone through, you will, where your 13-year-old boy says, Dad, I don't do Lego anymore. And you're stuck with $4,000 worth of Lego. So for those of you who haven't had that happen, you have that to look forward to. And for those of you who secretly want to play with an airport Lego in your study, we'll talk about how you can fight amongst yourselves for the centerpieces at the end of this presentation. And we'll take a look at the mural later, and that will actually show you how the airport's going to get built out. Well, once again, I'm shaking things up. I'm doing this high-wire act without any notes. Yay. And that's actually not a bad thing because we have an exciting story to tell, and we're starting off with what we're calling Flight Plan 2037. This is our vision of the future to become a sustainable gateway between the Americas and Asia. A world-class sustainable hub. That means a lot of growth. We're going to talk about 2016 in a moment, but it also means you have to plan for growth, and that's something we do a lot. We love plans. So I'm going to talk about our master plan, which we do every 10 years and goes out 20 years, the terminal plan, which is really going to affect you as passengers, and then all of the capital plans that actually will help that terminal become real, and of course, the financial plan to pay for it. We really believe in planning. We really believe in what Eisenhower said about it. The plan is nothing, but planning is everything. We plan everything from how this lunch is going to go to how the terminal is going to get built. We're going to pay for it. The master plan, you'll have seen some some stuff on your tables. Please let us know what you want to see out of your airport in the next 20 years. We really are keen on it, and you'll see later, we've already taken some input from the public into our new designs. But first, let's talk about the amazing year that was 2016. In one word, if I could sum up 2016, that word would be busy. Incredibly busy, planning, working operating and maintaining the airport while welcoming all kinds of new passengers. And on our busiest days in the summer, we were easily hitting 85,000 passengers and 100,000 bags. To put that in perspective, that is more than our Olympic departure day back in 2010 that we had 4 years to plan for. So that is a lot of passengers and a lot of bags. And actually that translated into quite a number for last year, 22.3 million passengers. Or to be specific, 22.285 is our last count. So we actually grew by 2 million passengers last year, 10% growth, and that's actually our second busiest growth year ever, only surpassed by 1996 with open skies with the United States and the opening of the new terminal building. So a tremendous amount of growth, and my hat's off to the airlines, to the airport staff that looked after 2 million more passengers, generally between about May and October. So where did they come from and where did they fly to? Well, they flew a lot inside Canada, but there were a bunch of new flights. And you may remember last year I talked about this. We actually bake a cake for every new inaugural flight. So last year we had to bake 18 cakes. So let's take a look at the cakes and the flights. WestJet, very active in 2016. Really exciting. I took the first flight to Gatwick. So the first intercontinental flight, if you will, to Gatwick on WestJet. And they also flew to Halifax and San Diego. I understand that WestJet now has a deal with the pilots to fly more intercontinental, so watch this space. They're going to go big into the international space. But Air Canada had a spectacular year, fully 70% of our growth. A great run of new services, starting off with express service to San Jose, and followed by double daily to London and new service to Chicago and Dallas. And yes, a big one to Brisbane. We actually won cake of the week for the world for that wave cake. And yes, I went on the flight and went to the koala sanctuary. Funny thing about koalas, they rather stink. And then in October, probably the most anticipated flight in BC, the flight to Delhi on the magnificent Air Canada 787-900. That flight just made entire communities dance, as you can see. And but wait, there's more. Rouge flew to San Diego and Dublin, and Air Canada has already announced for this year Taipei, Nagoya, Gatwick, and Frankfurt for the summer of 2017. We really we're very happy to welcome Air Transat and our first flight direct to Rome. And you can see the cake up there, the Cakeaceum. The marketing department made me say that. The Cakeaceum. It did not win an award. But there were more connections to the Americas. Aeromexico went from 7 flights a week to 10, and they have just announced that in June they'll be going to double daily. And that's amazing because Mexico City opens up all of the Americas, Central and South. And, you know, no coincidence, this is because the government lifted visa restrictions on Mexican passengers. And that's why we spend so much time in Ottawa trying to get our government to be a little more flexible, like many of our Western counterparts. And then the big one. On May 1st, the British Airways A380, the biggest jetliner in the world, decades of planning, that word again. In fact, when I was a young consultant back in 1995, one of my very first meetings was with Airbus on what was then called their A3XX project. So we built parking and de-icing pads that could look after this airplane. In fact, you'll see it going right through the parking and de-icing pad here in a moment with the world's biggest fire trucks. And we built in 2007 gates and bridges that could go up and down to the double hull. And then in 2016 it arrived. So 21 years in the making, getting ready for that beast. Every single sector grew very well last year at Vancouver. Domestic, US travel, and travel to Europe. But what really stood out was Asia, 15% growth. In July, Xiaomin Airlines, first flight to North America, lovely city, great route. Shortly thereafter, Sichuan flew to Zhengzhou. Cathay has announced this year more service to Hong Kong with their new A350-900. And just under the wire, on December 30th, Capital Airlines flew their aircraft from Qingdao and Hangzhou to Vancouver. I got a chance to fly on that flight, and it was lovely. What's interesting about that is, with the addition of that flight, we now have more mainland Chinese carriers at YVR than any other airport in North America, South America, or Europe. So think about that. More mainland Chinese carriers than Heathrow, Paris, New York, Chicago, or LA. Pretty impressive for a city our size. So I want to say thank you to all our airline partners, to WestJet. Mike, thank you very much. WestJet having a tougher year perhaps in Alberta, but really coming on strong in BC. But the shout out of the year has to go to Air Canada. Tertius, thank you very much. Air Canada has made Vancouver a trans-Pacific hub, flying aircraft and people from all over the world through Vancouver, which gives Canadians opportunity, which grows the province's economy, and especially brings visitors here to partake of BC and to grow our economy. So thank you very much, Air Canada. But, you know, the physical plant doesn't stand still. In fact, we worked on a bunch of projects to improve safety and throughput, because you're never finished as an airport, and you have to constantly build to keep up. So let's talk about a few things that we did during the summer. We completed the baggage backbone system. This is like a high-speed rail network which connects the 25 kilometers of baggage systems we have. And why is that important? Because it can connect any bag from anywhere in the terminal to anywhere else in under 30 minutes. So if you are leaving the cultural heart of BC, which is Kamloops, and you are flying to Qingdao, the cultural heart of Shandong province, let's say you're a little bit delayed. There's de-icing issues or fog in Kamloops, and so you're running through the terminal to make your flight. Your bag is going to pass you on the inside, and we're going to get it to that airplane. And we actually have radio frequency tags on the bag carrier, so we know exactly where it is to make sure it makes your flight. It's going to be worth every penny of the $200 million we've spent on it. And it was hard to build because there's not as much time at night where there aren't flights anymore, so it was a very tricky project. We also trialed a new self-bag drop system, and we're trialing that with our partners GlidePath, fastest in the world, rolling that out in 2017. Here you see crews outside working on taxiway services and runway and safety areas. When completed this year, our runway and safety areas will conform to world standards, and that's in advance of any Canadian standard yet. And of course, dry season is also our busiest season. That's just the way it is. And so they have to clean up every night and be ready for flights and then start again at night. So my hat's off to the crews, to the engineers, to everybody who works on the Airside at night. We also continued upgrading our apron lighting with LEDs. No surprise, everybody's doing that at home and at work. We save a lot of power, about 715,000 kilowatt hours, but they're also adaptive to cut down on light pollution for our neighbors. We can dim them using an app. So once again, great work to all the engineers who planned, the escorts, to the people working out there and cleaning it up. And I just want to stop here for a second, and I wanted to talk about the fact that we probably had the worst winter in 30 years, starting on the 3rd of December. And I know it went well because we weren't in the news. So that's pretty good. You know, the last time snow fell before December 3rd was 1,000 days before that. And so it shows you the value of that word again, planning. Our crews planning and getting the equipment ready and being ready for it, because we're not like Winnipeg or anywhere else. It's not that common. And you'll note that you didn't hear about us with delays or runways that were closed. So my hat's off to the snow and de-icing teams. Let's talk about revenue for a minute. We get about half of our revenue, 48%, from non-aeronautical. That's what passengers pay in the shops, restaurants, parking, and duty-free. But we also have been trying to maximize that from the very beginning. And so I want to show you some innovative ways that we do that. Our Border Express kiosks are a great example. So invented at YVR with Customs and CBSA. John Osowski, where are you? The new president of CBSA, thank you very much. Great, we have a great relationship, and we said to each other, look, we can't continue to count on more and more counters and more staff. So we have to invent a way to get people through customs faster. And we did. The automatic border kiosks. And they're almost 8 years old now, but they really helped speed people through the Canadian border. And we even sold some other Canadian airports. And then we said, okay, with U.S. Customs and Border Protection, and Lynn, with your support and your predecessor, thank you, they said, let's do it on the U.S. side. And that really took off. The software built in Richmond, the hardware built in Surrey, and within days of it going live in 2013, we were selling literally hundreds of them into the U.S. because they work that well. We're like Apple, though. We always come up with a new model, and so this year we've got the GBX, the Global Express kiosk, and we're very excited about this new product. It incorporates facial recognition, and customers are going to start using it this year. So what a great story. We invented this so you could get through customs faster at YVR, but you know what? People wanted them at other airports. So we've now sold over 1,000, I think it's up to about 1,050 of these kiosks around the world. A little airport in Canada that invented something that other airports in the world want. We're actually the world leader in this technological niche. What's another innovative way to make revenue? Well, why not build a mall? So we did. Designer Outlet Center on Sea Island. It has done extremely well. In November, during what's called Black Friday, on that one day, we had 30,000 visitors. We are now 91% full of shops, so along with our partners, MacArthur Glen, we're considering when to do phase 2. Now, why is this important? It's important because it helps us keep our rates and fees down to the airlines. In fact, we started a program called Connect YVR a year ago, on the 1st of January 2016, and we reduced our rates by 15%. Now, those of you in business out there, if I said to you, you've got a vendor that's going to reduce their rates and charges by 15%, you would say, I need to talk to them. And that's our whole point, and that's why I think we had all those new flights and new airlines, because we are striving to be very, very competitive with our airline rates and charges. And that long-term strategy, I think, is paying off. That goes right back to the very first designs of the new terminal building. In fact, Airport Revenue News, which is a aviation business publication, says that Vancouver has the highest spend per passenger in non-aeronautical of any airport in North America. But we don't just run the airport here, we live here. We're part of the community. And we love to give back, and we love to be part of things like the Pride Parade. And we also are part of a bunch of other community events. In fact, we gave $1 million to community events last year, things like the BC Mobility Opportunities Society and their adaptive paddleboarding, or the Great Canadian Shoreline Cleanup. And in fact, we launched a community chill out at Larryburg Flight Path Park. It was great success. I mean, how could it not be? Music, food, airplanes. And I think the people of Burkeville are waiting for us to do it again this next year. So how do you measure an airport success? Well, I mean, besides the 18 new destinations and the hundreds of thousands of hotel rooms, you're very welcome. We are actually the first airport in 2016 to be Salmon Safe certified. We're very excited about that. And we are also accredited by ACI with carbon accreditation, skipping the first level, going right to the second level. We also do a lot of work, for example, on waste. We work with tenants and with others, and in fact, we actually exceeded our goal for 2020 by diverting over 50% of our waste in 2016. Now, there's other rewards, but I don't want to brag, and I don't want to stand here and tell you, all the awards. I think you would find that tedious, and frankly, that's just not our style to just sit there and brag. But I would like to tell you 3 awards that we are proud of, and Stannis, I think, named them. CAPA, being named Airport of the Year for our strategy, that was really powerful because that puts us in the same level as Amsterdam Schiphol Airport or Singapore's Changi, who have won that award, and that's really significant. The second one, again mentioned earlier, Skytrax, 13 million passengers over 6 months on 39 categories, voted Vancouver Airport the best airport in North America. The first time an airport has won in any category 7 times in a row. So that one means a lot. And in the middle, you'll see one that I just added a few days ago because I think it's significant. The Governance Professionals of Canada said we are leaders in enterprise risk management. And that means a lot because we look at everything through the lens of enterprise risk management. And you would expect us to do that, but I think you'll agree it's not holding us back either. We just make sure that we measure the risk. So, will we win the Skytrax Award again? I don't know. It's being tabulated right now. We'll find out in a month or 2. It's not going to be easy. We're in a new weight category. We have millions more passengers, but we're going to do everything we can. And so that growth actually leads me into the next segment. You know what can be hard? It can be hard as a business to actually pull yourself out of the day-to-day and try to envision the future. But we have to do that every 10 years. We, by law, have to look out 20 years. It also makes sense. So what we did is we actually hired a futurist, and you're seeing some of the movies here. And it was a little bit fanciful. You see things like vertical gardens that would supply our restaurants. You see hover robots. By the way, within a day of this coming out, somebody said, when are you getting those robots? So By the way, if I could invent hover robots, I might not be here right now. But we like to mix the fanciful and the possible. So, for example, in terms of airplane technology, we really don't see that there's going to be that big of a change in the next 20 years. Oh, there may be a blended wing fuselage. There may be, instead of windows, liquid crystal displays. There may be hybrid or even jet props. But really, if you're going to Rio in the next 20 years, you're probably going on a 777, a 787, an A350, or an A380. So that helps bound the problem a little bit. But we do like to go out and talk to people and say, what is it that you want to see? Because even within those boundaries, there's all kinds of possibilities. So we recently, over the past year, held a lot of consultations. We talked to our business partners 20 times. We held 4 public meetings at the airport and 5 road shows across Metro Vancouver. 500,000 people watched that little movie, and we've had thousands of people send us emails. By the way, I'll have a coffee with you. I'll read your email. If you've seen something at another airport or a museum or any public venue and you'd like to see it at the airport, we want to hear about it. And again, I'm going to show you at the very end an idea that came out of our master plan consultations. So when you start with a master plan, what you have to do is you have to forecast the passenger growth. Now, a lot of times, airports will use low, medium, and high, and that's not a bad thing. We went to our colleagues at Intervistas and said, can you funk that up a little bit? So they did. They thought about all the things that could happen. Could oil prices go up and down? Could there be instability here and there? Could airlines merge? Assigned a probability at every one of these things, and then ran it for 10,000 times, and ended up with this big graph. And what you have here at the bottom is what we call the 5th percentile, the most unfavorable outcome. In the middle, the green line goes all the way out to 2037, is the most likely outcome. And then the top line at 95th percentile is, okay, if everything went well, what would happen? And we're going to base our master plan from a financing point of view on the green line, the most likely. But from building, so we can stay ahead a little bit, we're going to base the building part on the 85th percentile line. Now, do we believe these numbers perfectly? No. No way. It never turns out that way. But it gives us a good guide so we can either pull back if we see things happening, or we can advance so we don't end up too crowded. So that translates into these graphs. You can see along the bottom from 2017 to 2037, and we're well on the way to about 25 million passengers by 2020. I got to tell you, 4 years ago, 3 years ago, looked like a stretch target. Now it looks pretty achievable. By about 2025, 30 million passengers, and 2037, 37 million passengers. On the cargo front, we see a little bit of a stall out for the next few years to the early 20s, and then it's going to take off, and we're actually putting money and effort into a company to try and help grow that business. But the interesting story for an airport is the takeoffs and landings. I mean, look how it bumps up a little bit, and that's relatively flat for the next 20 years. How can you have that graph with takeoffs and landings and that graph with passenger growth? Bigger airplanes flying more full, which is a fantastic story. It's good for us. It means that the airside isn't going to get crowded, or airspace. It's good for communities because it means that emissions, both greenhouse gases and noise, are going to stay relatively low. And primarily for us, it means we're not really worried about building a new runway for the next 20 years, which is an amazing story for an airport because runways are expensive and difficult. I'm going to talk about where those runways might go, but first let me orient you to the airport. So that's Sea Island, Vancouver to the north, Richmond to the east, and you can see the north runway open in '96, the south runway, the crosswind runway, Grant McConaughey, which comes all the way down into the terminal, the Y of the international terminal and domestic terminal, the parkade in the middle there, and the Canada line, which kind of parallels Grant McConaughey. This is the little suburb of Burkeville. We have our own little suburb on the airport. It's fantastic. And we have a designer outlet center up there. So 10 years ago, we did the master plan. We actually spent a lot of time where, if we were going to build runways, where would they go? And they can only go, realistically, one of two places. Into the foreshore, so build an island offset from the north runway, build an island 2 miles out into the water, or the close-in south parallel, which we would try to keep on the island. There are pros and cons to both. This brings a lot more capacity, but as you might imagine, a lot more cost, a lot more complexity, and probably 10 to 15 years of environmental hearings and trying to get that approved. This one should be easier to get approved, although it would still take some time, but it doesn't bring as much capacity. So there are pros and cons to both. Now, we don't think we need it for the next 20 years, but we'll be watching the passenger growth and the aircraft growth and takeoffs and landings. So you may well see us planning for those runways, one or either of them, in the next 20 years, because it's going to take about 10 years of planning before it's operational. But there are a lot of other projects we are going to be doing in the next 20 years. You can see 5 phases here, and just to roughly go through them, this is about $400 to $500 million of airside projects. These fuchsia-colored parallel taxiways, think of those as extra lanes on the freeway. They help the aircraft get by each other heading for the runway. A big one, the north-south taxiway, which would actually connect up the north runway and the south runway at the east end. Right now, it's a bit of a horseshoe. This would make it a circle. Very good for the aircraft, very good for the air traffic controllers. If you're leaving from the US side, going to the south to that runway, it's 4 kilometers. It's only 1.5 kilometers going down the north-south taxiway. The savings in emissions is huge. This could be the first taxiway ever built by an airport just to save greenhouse gas emissions. And then you see a lot of the other big hatched areas. Those are the aprons that will be needed to support the new terminal. We'd like to do it all tomorrow, but it's not fiscally or physically possible. So what we're doing now is we're figuring out the best possible timing to do that over the next 20 years. You might imagine we ran a lot of detailed models: airspace, terminal, air traffic control, taxiing, but we were quite surprised to find out that ground access is actually likely to be our biggest problem over the next 10 years. Now, maybe that's not so surprising given that we're in Vancouver and it's a problem for everybody. You may not know that we actually own the majority of the roads on Sea Island, and we actually own the Arthur Lang and the Dinsmore bridges. We did put $300 million into the Canada Line. We don't make any money off that, by the way. The ad fare you pay doesn't come to us. We just did it. It's the right thing to do. In fact, we lost money in parking for years afterwards. But we're very proud that 20% of the people now who come to the airport, both to work and fly, are using the Canada Line. Another 5% bus. So 25% take transit to the airport. That's amongst the highest ridership of any airport in Canada. When we talked to the public, ground access was on their mind. So they wanted things like, on Russ Baker Way, a dedicated lane to the terminal, so they're not caught in the Vancouver traffic. They would like perhaps a Templeton lane, so they're not caught in the traffic. Change the interchange. Perhaps a park and ride fast bus from Surrey. You know, I worry about that. If you're in Surrey, you have a 7 o'clock flight in the morning, how do you get to the airport if you think about how the roads can get clogged? Interestingly, in our master plan, this is the thing we can't control, and we don't have all the answers, so we have to work very closely over the next few years with the regional transportation authorities to try and solve our issue of getting people to the airport. So let's talk about the most exciting part for you, I think, which is the terminal. It's also the most pressing for us because at 22.3 million passengers, we are at 88% of the nominal design capacity of the terminal. Now, we can do some operational tricks, you know, and some moving airplanes around to get up past 25 million, but you wouldn't want us to do it for too long because then it's just going to get crowded. So we actually commissioned a team of our best and brightest and said, look at every possible option. So they looked at 57 different options across 4 categories. The first option was the expansion to the east. Now, in all of these, you'll see that there's the blue, which is the existing terminal, and the green is what would be added. And you can see on some of these are quite significant additions to the terminal. The east option was actually contemplated in the last master plan. There's even room for another Canada Line station in front of it. It just grows the terminal out to the east and gets rid of parking. The west option would mean scrapping the crosswind runway and building a satellite terminal in the infield. And what you need to do there is you need to build a subway, like an 8-lane subway for people, bags, and equipment. Basically a cut and cover subway from the existing terminal, and then you cover it over and then you have taxiways. So that was the west option. Very expensive. You've seen this in places like Heathrow and Atlanta. Now, interesting moment in time, because we're designing the terminals, gave us a chance to do some myth busting. There's been a myth since I've been at the airport, and the myth is that the U.S. departures are on the north, the U.S. departures terminal, but they're all going to take off the south runway and they're going to head south, right, because they're going to the U.S. So this myth was that the airport is upside down. So we had an opportunity to flip them during our modeling, and turned out that it didn't make that much of a difference. So you may well have some myths like this in your own organization that people just think, oh, that makes sense to me, and I would highly recommend that you break them open through modeling. And finally, the last possibility was to expand from the center. Now, this is only possible if we can increase the processing through all of the things that as a passenger you have to do, through check-in, through security, and through customs. So you can see why we spend so much time on things like the kiosks, the baggage drop, and we're working with CATSA on security, because we have to get people through 2, 3, or 4 times faster in order for this to work. Interesting, you go to an ICAO design manual, and it will tell you that the optimum design for an airport is a 6 pier airport and 25 million passengers. So we're going to take it to 37, but we're doing the six arms. So all of these options, 57 options, you see them all here, were judged against our strategic objectives. And that's pretty obvious. We want to be connectivity, we want to have good customer service, we want to build on our foundations. And then they actually added a whole pile of criteria and started judging them against criteria. So what you're going to see here as I talk about certain criteria, they're going to fall away. So let's talk about cost. The West one would have been about $1 or $2 billion. Now, one of your, in the audience, one of your great-granddaughters may be the CEO when they have to do the West option. It's not going to be me. It's probably not going to be my successor. But eventually, if you need the space, that's what's going to happen. But not yet. And so it fell off because it was really not that good for connectivity. It was very expensive. A big one is passenger connectivity. You ever driven up to an airport and the taxi driver says, "Which terminal are you in?" I hate that. Because what if you get it wrong? You're really going to miss your flight. So that was a big one. Can we keep it tight? Can we keep it easy for people to connect? Another one has got to be the experience, the public experience. When you walk in, are you going to feel like a bug on a plate, or are you going to like it? Is it going to have a nice look and feel? Operational efficiency. Will the airline have to split its operation? They don't like doing that. It's expensive. It's not good for the customer. Another one that's important, and we really took a close look at it, was incrementalism. Do we have to spend billions, or can we do it in $200 or $300 million chunks? Anybody that's been in the industry will say, look, I'd much rather do it that way. Let's build 4 gates and then another 4 rather than 8 and spend all that money, and halfway through, the bottom falls out of the market. So in the end, the winner was, drum roll, the expanded center design. The sexiest name for an airport terminal ever. And that's what happens when engineers give the name instead of marketing. We'll have to work on that. But what you see there is the blue is the existing terminal, and the green, we've even decided to go even farther out on the top left there, the Pier D. Now at this moment, we're going to ask for a volunteer out of the audience. Oh, Ian Black, please. Come on up. And we're going to use a little augmented reality to show you what that's going to look like and all of the associated capital plans. No pressure, Ian.
None taken.
So Ian's had 38 seconds of training.
And 4 glasses of wine.
There you go. So go ahead, Ian. Pick up the iPad. Hold it up high. Drag it over. And hit start. And you will see through the magic of augmented reality the building of the terminal. And you can see there is nothing here. It is flat. This is actually occurring in cyberspace. So just to look at it up here, you can see that's the transborder side, the international side, the hotel is here, and the domestic building. So the first thing we've got to do, it's the province's biggest building. We got to heat and cool it. So could you hit the electrical button, please? Thank you. We're going to be building a facility at the back of the parking lots. Going to the board just in the next few months, we think it'll be geothermal. We'll sink 1,600 wells, and we'll use that temperature differential to heat and cool the building. Our GHGs will drop tremendously because of that. And we'll also put great backup generators in that building and a data center. Okay, you can push that one away. And what about the parkade? You might say, well, in the modern world with ride sharing and Uber and all that, are you going to need a parkade? Yes, we believe we will. This parkade will be attached to the old parkade. There will be a system inside the parkade, so when you come in, you can see a green light where there's an empty spot. So I'm pretty sure people appreciate that, and it'll really speed things up. It'll be very modern. In between the parkade will be a ground transportation center that I think will be fantastic in the future. Also, we're going to take the rainwater off both levels of the parkade. We're going to store it. We're going to use it for droughts. We're going to use it for emergency firefighting in the event of an earthquake, and probably to wash rental cars. That'll drop the amount of potable water that we use. Okay, get rid of that one, please. And next would be Pier F. That's the U.S. side. Here, we're moving around there. That's the U.S. side. You can see it extending out from where the hotel is. We'll get rid of the 20-year old permanent temporary barn that people are using now. And if there's anybody here from Horizon, I'm sure they'd be clapping and jumping. We're going to make that modern. We're going to gain 4 gates in the initial improvement, but we're also going to improve the entire passenger experience going through transborder from security and customs. And then get rid of that, please. One more, and then to Pier F, or Pier D, sorry. Pier D, which is the big international pier. Good man. It's going to be even longer than that. The reason it gets longer is international aircraft with international wingspans. The wingspan of an A380 is over 260 feet. Put 3 of those together and you're easily out to 1,200 feet when you add spacing between them. So that's it if you want to hit all there in. So the white
The 2037?
is the existing terminal. And there's the green. That's all going to happen over the next 20 years, expanding the terminal from the inside out. Thank you very much, Ian. So, now here's a cool thing. Not that that wasn't cool. Thank you, Ian. But I want to show you a fly-through of Pier D. So a couple of points before you go. This is conceptual. It will almost certainly not look exactly like this, but it's conceptual. It keeps on board with our theme of a BC sense of place, of keeping our First Nations art, nice cool colors, nice textures, more wood. And we also did something that our master planning consultations told us people wanted. Could you bring more of the outside inside? So ladies and gentlemen, over the next 10 years, here's the expansion to the international wing at YVR. You can see it's big, you can see it's beautiful. One of the things that I'm really proud of, and I can't wait to see this become a reality, is, ladies and gentlemen, an actual Gulf island with real trees in the middle of the terminal. I don't think it gets more iconically BC than that. Our concept is it will be open to the outside, so if it's snowing, it'll be snowing inside the terminal in that glassed-in area. If it's raining, you'll see the rain. Kind of think this is where I should just drop the mic. But I can't, because I have a couple things. Thank you. Just a couple more slides. So a big one for all of you in the room, how will we pay for this? It is an ambitious plan. We're 75 projects, big projects over the next 20 years. It's $5.6 billion. I would like to remind everybody that none of that will be government money. We do not receive any funding or taxpayer money, so that's all going to be internally generated. We can finance it even if we just have the 50th percentile passengers. We'll actually take on some debt, but you'll see that our revenues, non-aeronautical, aeronautical, and AIF will help. We'll take on some more debt. We can. We just celebrated Standard & Poor's giving us a AA credit rating for 11 years in a row. We have one of the highest credit ratings of any airport in the world. And so we're very confident that we can financially build this plan. So there's a lot going on, but we have a great team that's committed to building the best possible airport for BC. But here's something you may not realize. It's your airport. Yes, we run it through a community-based board, but it's yours. You've paid for it. Every time you pay for the AIF, every time you park, every time you buy a hot dog or a Starbucks, you're paying for the airport. That's what's put $3.4 billion into this amazing asset. So you may have heard that the federal government is talking about asset recycling, which essentially means taking the major airports back and selling them off to the highest bidder. We're not in favor of it because, quite frankly, the price of everything would go up. We run a very tight ship, and we run a very close ship where the only money that leaves the island now is rent to the federal government and payments in lieu of taxes to our local municipalities. If we have a private operator, two things will happen. To make their return, the price will go up, and it will no longer be a community-run airport. It'll be run out of New York, London, and Toronto. So you're the movers and shakers of Vancouver. If you like your community airport, if you like what we're doing, if you get asked, or if you have an opportunity to tell somebody in the federal government, we'd really appreciate it. You'd say, you know what, we like our community airport. So thank you very much. Thank you for your support of the airport. Thank you for coming out today. Please send me your ideas. You can see that one idea, bring the outside inside, is something that's really got some great legs. I'd love to hear from you with any ideas you might have. So with that, I will say thank you.